Tribal Courts by Tanóok, Taylor, Neal. In terms of treaties, the Tlingit and Haida tribes of southeast Alaska did not sign any formal treaties with the U.S. government. Alaska was purchased from Russia in 1867. The U.S. government treaty-making era with tribes ended in 1871. The image on the bottom right is from the Alaska Native Brotherhood Convention of 1929. At this convention, Tlingit leaders began to pursue legal land claims against the U.S. government. The Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska is an organization that consists of both Tlingit and Haida people, and this is the tribal court that we are going to be diving into today, the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Tribal Court. The Tlingit and Haida tribe of Southeast Alaska have occupied Southeast Alaska since time immemorial. The Battle of Sitka is from 1804, and at this time, the Tlingit tribe finally lost to Russia in battle. And after this conflict, Russia's presence in Alaska is more solidified. As stated previously, Alaska is acquired by the United States from Russia in 1867. In the next slide, we're going to look at a brief literature review, and the literature review mentions that there's 4 prominent moments in Alaska history that have a significant impact on the tribal populations. The first is the Alaska Purchase, which I just briefly mentioned. Again, Alaska is purchased by the United States from Russia in 1867, more than 50 years after the Battle of Sitka. The gold rush is the next big transition within Alaska history and it's Alaska's impact on native communities. Following the gold rush, the salmon canning industry and then World War II are some detrimental events for native people. If we look at the image on the far right, we see different clans for the Tlingit tribe and a map of where those different clans are located. The Haida also have different clans within their tribe. However, this map specifically mentions Tlingit clans. To the left of our clan map, we see more distinction with the tribes throughout Alaska. And both the Tlingit and Haida tribes are in southeast Alaska, and we can see that indicated on the map. To the left of our indigenous map of Alaska, we see an image of what is supposed to represent the Battle of Sitka. So this is the Tlingit tribe in battle with Russia. Here is a closer look at the Tlingit tribes, clans, and houses of Southeast Alaska. So here is our literature review. Space-Time Colonialism by Juliana Hugh Peggs emphasizes Alaska's indigenous and Asian entanglement. So in other words, this book captures Asian diaspora in Alaska. This book is titled, based on an argument from the author, where she addresses the United States colonial agenda, claiming that Alaska enabled a colonial agenda by categorizing and racializing indigenous and Asian peoples. She acknowledges that Asian immigrants were quote unquote out of place, and Alaska natives were quote unquote out of time. Space-time colonialism strengthened U.S. imperial expansion and settler colonialism. Spacetime colonialism highlights intersections of U.S. colonialism, indigenous dispossession, Asian immigration in the United States. I bring up this brief mention of Asian diaspora in Alaska in order to create some context with these tribes that we are addressing. The Tlingit tribe specifically has quite a large representation of people who are also Filipino, and some say that there is a strong presence of Filipino people in Southeast Alaska because of the fishing opportunities that were presented over time, and also conflict that resulted in migration. Some cultural practices of the Tlingit tribe specifically, um, both the Tlingit and Haida tribes are matriarchal. Both Tlingit and Haida tribes had a presence of shamanism, and that was quite central to many practices and traditions and functions of the tribe. Both the Tlingit and Haida tribes used a class ranking system, and both Tlingit and Haida tribes, as well as other Pacific Northwest tribes, there was a presence of slavery that impacted a lot of social connections and advancements, as well as the economy. Some traditional tribal conflict resolution. Um, a peace ceremony was known as Guwakan. Guwakan is briefly addressed in the image in the top left corner. I'm not going to get too deeply into it, but as mentioned in the last tribe, shamans were quite a significant part of Tlingit and Haida practices. And in the top left corner, we see a Tlingit shaman and Tlingit shaman, depending on their experience and their position in different clans and in the community. Shaman would sometimes be leading these peace ceremonies. Some peace ceremonies were also called deer ceremonies. The image on the bottom of the screen is archived footage of a peace ceremony that took place within the past 60 years. Some traditional tribal conflict resolution for the Tlingit tribe also included clan leaders meeting. As stated previously, class ranking was quite central to the community. Another form of traditional tribal conflict resolution for the Tlingits was a hostage exchange. And this hostage exchange would sometimes involve a slave because slaves um, were quite common for different clans. So sometimes clans would be used to resolve conflict, or sometimes community members would become slaves because they were captured by other clans. Moving on to tribal courts, the Central Council for Tlingit and Haida have a tribal court. This tribal court also includes a wellness court. Aside from the Central Council Tlingit and Haida tribal court, there's also a Yakutat Tlingit tribal court, which is also in Southeast Alaska. And additionally, there is a circle peacemaking program that involves restorative justice. Judges, prosecutors, clerks. The Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes Tribal Courts mission for practice is seeking justice through tribal values. Judicial officers in the Tlingit and Haida Tribal Court involve justices, judges, and magistrates. There are provisions for judge pro tempore appointments for specific cases. Court personnel includes clerk of the court, Court Administrator, and Court of Elders. Court of Elders resolve disputes using traditional methods and addresses questions regarding customary law. Tribal Court handles adoptions, child custody, child support, domestic violence, guardianships, marriage, and paternity. There are a couple landmark cases that I want to acknowledge. A federal court landmark case that is quite significant, not only for Southeast Alaska, but also for many indigenous communities, is the Teton-Tlingit versus Tongass National Forest in 1955. I'm not going to go too deep into this case, but this case definitely highlights land rights and it acknowledges a transition of national government ownership in national parks throughout the United States of America and the resources within those national parks. A tribal court landmark case for the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Tribal Court is a 2016 case called the State of Alaska versus Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribe. Within the State of Alaska versus Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes, the Alaska Supreme Court ruled that the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes has inherent authority to handle child welfare matters involving their children, including jurisdiction over non-member parents. Some key legal precedents, land back efforts and ongoing activism, environmental protections and sustainability, community knowledge and national park entitlement, as well as improved representation in the National Park Service. Appellate review. Appeals from the tribal trial court are heard by the tribal Supreme Court. To appeal a decision, a party must file a notice of appeal with the clerk of the court within 30 days. Appellant must file a statement of reasons with supporting documents. The Supreme Court Chief Justice reviews the document and could schedule an oral argument. Bar Association for tribe and membership requirements. The tribal court bar application submission process includes submitting a motion and declaration for admission to tribal court bar, an admission fee, swearing in ceremony with the Chief Justice, and ordering and receiving a certificate of admission to the tribal court bar. Minimum qualifications include a bachelor's degree, 2 years experience working in tribal, federal, or state court, no felony convictions or misdemeanors within the last 4 years, and a valid Alaska driver's license. Some issues in tribal court administration. There is a challenge with intersectional representation and advocacy. I say this as somebody who identifies as Afro-Tlingit. While I know that things have improved in my tribal community, I'm aware of some harm and anti Blackness that can occur within our tribal community from time to time. And as most of us know, there are um, associations with the criminal justice system that Black individuals experience that are distinct from Native and Indigenous people, although there is a intersectional connection to our experience within the criminal justice system collectively, in terms of distinct tribal court practices. We can't help but acknowledge how this challenge is inevitable. Another challenge is determining clan and membership eligibility. Um, as a lot of us are aware of, context the past 100 years have shown how removal manifests in a lot of different ways. One of those ways is common stories and experiences with adoption, and by being Tlingit or Haida, or Tlingit and Haida, and by being adopted, sometimes we are unable to determine which clan we came from. And as I've stated earlier in the presentation, um, class, rank, and matriarchal practices are central to Tlingit and Haida. So, not knowing your clan, which is determined by your mother's bloodline, it can lead to stigma within the community. It can lead to how eligible we are in terms of membership, even if you know you have Tlingit and Haida parents, or Tlingit or Haida parents. Um, this leads to the other issue or challenge that we listed, which is adoption stigma. And again, there is some sort of community interaction that can occur sometimes in Southeast Alaska if you are not um, connected to your biological family. Similar to other challenges mentioned here, there have been improvements over time, but the challenges, and the stigma still stand today. Ensuring access to justice for tribal members. There are community forums to respect tribal values and traditions in the judicial process. The court has a broad scope of jurisdiction to support the community in as many ways as possible. There is quite a bit of outreach and collaboration throughout multiple organizations in Southeast Alaska. There's a lot of ongoing conversation, there's a lot of opportunities to contribute to dialogue and discourse, and there is uh, often court development and training initiatives. Police and prosecutor. So with the Tlingit and Haida tribal court, we don't necessarily have our own police force as we see in other tribal courts throughout the Americas. We do have village public safety officers, tribal victim service programs, and we have Tlingit and Haida representation in our local law enforcement as well as our state law enforcement. There are ongoing efforts to encourage specialized training regarding cultural sensitivity. Although there are initiatives where there is specialized training regarding cultural sensitivity, we must acknowledge that sometimes this training is not enough to contribute to day to day interactions and experiences within the criminal justice system. Technology integration. Some of the technological advancements within the Tlingit and Haida Tribal Court and enforcement have been software updates, internet updates, accessibility improvements, updates to digital technology, and updates to training. As technological advancements take place within law enforcement in general, how does tribal law enforcement secure access to advanced technology? When I say this with the knowledge and awareness of advanced technology that continues to become readily available to law enforcement throughout America. Obviously, this is depending on the state's budget for said law enforcement agencies. However, generally speaking, law enforcement does have access to military grade technology that does have a immediate impact on the public and has the power to control and influence the public in more ways than one. How do we create checks and balances within monitoring the shifts in advanced technology available to law enforcement? How can we create and maintain ethical decisions within our law enforcement initiatives? Legal education is improving for tribal communities throughout the country. For Tlingit and Haida specifically, there are initiatives at the University of Alaska Southeast, not only in criminology and criminal justice programs, but also with ongoing conversations encouraged by the community and ongoing efforts to try to bring awareness and shift perspectives of how our tribal court can support us and advance our communities. Southeast Alaska Heritage Institute has ongoing conversations and public events to um, build conversation, build community, and to continue expanding on the tribal court practices that we have developed. See Alaska has similar initiatives to the University of Alaska Southeast and the Southeast Alaska Heritage Institute. These are all organizations that are very committed to serving our tribes and serving our communities in hopes to continue building these foundations we've established within the tribe. The University of Oklahoma is unique in the opportunities to create a central context of indigenous and native connections to law. And within this unique connection and shared understanding of context, there are several avenues to explore how you can personalize the information and bring it back to your own tribal court or to other practices of law in the world. Tribal courts, importance of tribal sovereignty, tribal courts, importance to tribal sovereignty. This is a concept that varies region to region. I think in Southeast Alaska specifically, tribal courts are important because although we're unique in the sense that we don't have treaties that bind us, we have still fallen victim to shifts and control within the United States of our resources and within our ability to act as a community and as a sovereign entity. Um, so, tribal courts are important to tribal sovereignty because tribal courts give us a chance to rebuild our independence and our responsibility to one another, as well as our responsibility to all generations. Tribal courts are important to tribal sovereignty because it helps us remain a sense of identity and it helps us to maintain who we want to be moving forward and who we believe we were prior to contact.